Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Tonight I wanted to talk to you about the latest revelations coming from Palestinians who were kidnapped by Israel and are slowly being released inside of Gaza, alongside more statements coming from the civil authorities inside of Gaza about the level of disaster that is being inflicted and suffering of the Palestinian people. I also wanted to share with you the latest warnings coming from the ex-defense minister of Israel about a civil war inside of Israel. This is something that has been raised by many Israeli officials in the past 14 months, but it did not start on October the 7th. The year before that, many were also speaking about a civil war with record protests against Benjamin Netanyahu, and now everything is resurfacing again. His aggression and his plans to change the judicial system in Israel, the fact that he is facing criminal charges and he is going to court, and the mismanagement of the genocide and his barbarism in the region that led Israel to a disastrous position where it's withdrawing its ambassadors from countries now that they had long relations with, and it's being viewed more and more as a pariah state globally. I'm going to start off with Gaza. So there were some Palestinians being released from the Israeli prisons talking about the level of suffering that they faced when it comes to these people inside of the prisons. The people inside the Israeli prisons, the Palestinians, they face regular torture. Some of them are tortured to death. Israel kidnapped many doctors inside of Gaza. One of them was raped to death just a couple of weeks ago. And the stories that these people are bringing are beyond imagination. I mean, the horror of these prisons inside of Israel, yet they are not being spoken about to the sufficient level. Israel likes to highlight the suffering of what it labels as hostages who are prisoners of war inside of Gaza, despite the fact that it's killing the majority of them, the Palestinian resistance. The other day, they released information about having verified intelligence that Israel deliberately targeted more Israelis held in Gaza. Some of them are in North Gaza. North Gaza has been witnessing a campaign of full-blown genocide and ethnic cleansing for the past 60 days. That's apart from the previous year before that, when they faced massive bombardment and ethnic cleansing attempts by Israel. And the people that are being released from the Israeli prisons are describing days without food, constant torture, being left in the cold, some of them being driven away in masses from Gaza on trucks in the night, left in the dark, having sleep deprivation, food deprivation, water deprivation, and constant interrogation. Some of them were released by Israel after all of this torture, only for Israel to execute them on the way back to Gaza. In some cases, Israel returned to Gaza bags full of bodies without identifying any of them. That's a catastrophe on top of the catastrophe when it comes to the levels of people who were assassinated and killed in the genocide in Gaza. The fact that many of these people are unidentified, and this is something that's going to be a challenge for the Palestinian authorities inside of Gaza, even if we reach a ceasefire soon. And then you have the warnings coming from Gaza, the government media inside of Gaza, saying that the Palestinian people are facing the most brutal historical catastrophe of our modern era. Israel's trying to hide what they're doing and deviate from the genocide in Gaza, alongside talks about reaching a ceasefire, because Donald Trump apparently is pushing for a ceasefire inside of Gaza. There are indications that we are about to reach something. However, it's still being delayed. More mediators are playing a part, are playing a role, but there is nothing solid enough to say that we are indeed looking at a ceasefire very soon. All that we're hearing are talks, but there is more activity than normal when it comes to the ceasefire. Now, one of the reasons could be the following. When it comes to Lebanon, there are Israelis withdrawing now more and more. So, for the first time since the start of the operation, the commando and paratrooper brigades left Lebanon. According to Makor Rishon, they said since the ceasefire agreement came into effect 3 weeks ago, Division 98 forces have continued operations in southern Lebanon while maintaining the terms of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon, with the aim of preventing Hezbollah from preparing and removing threats to the state of Israel and its citizens. What happened in Lebanon indicates that we could see something inside of Gaza. However, the reason that the situation is being delayed in Gaza is the fact that we don't have a formula that will be long-lasting. And long-lasting, by the way, is something also fragile. The reason that we did see success in Lebanon, again a fragile success as well, is because the ceasefire in Lebanon was established on the 1701 resolution of the United Nations that was simply a continuation from 2006. The Lebanese side insisted on not having any amendments when it comes to that resolution, and Israel had to follow because they faced massive blows one day up until that ceasefire came to effect, after Hezbollah launched approximately 500 missiles on Israel. So they are withdrawing from Lebanon, and it looks like things are moving towards a bigger ceasefire. But the reason they don't have that in Gaza yet is, firstly, well, the Palestinian side is insisting on the demands for the Palestinian people, including complete withdrawal and the displaced being returned, the rebuilding, all of the aid coming in, and then, of course, having a prisoner exchange with Israel. And the Palestinian side is insisting on not having anyone released who is top ranking when it comes to the IDF, and that's something understandable because you wouldn't want to give Israel whatever it wants and allow them to continue their genocide in Gaza. But something else here is very important, is the fact that Israel is looking for as much reassurance as possible for the future. And that's not something that Hamas and the Palestinian resistance will be giving Israel very easily. There are many formulas to try and show that, well, okay, we can have a joint government, for example, in Gaza, something temporary. However, the talk about the elimination of Hamas, the talks about the Palestinian resistance giving up its weapons, all of that talk is not something negotiable from the Palestinian side, and that's Israel. That's something that Israel will have to live with. And they have lived with it for a very long time. But again, Benjamin Netanyahu is looking for as much as possible, including the fact that he is still facing pressure internally. Now, there are talks in Israel now that, well, Netanyahu is actually not publishing a lot of the ceasefire details in Gaza simply because he does not want a lot of criticism, and he doesn't want it to fail, because if it does get published, well, he's going to receive immediate scrutiny, and that could hinder the prospect of a ceasefire. That's something that we have seen in the past. Usually when it comes to a ceasefire, you would leave all of the crucial elements up until the end, and that appears to be what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. But Benjamin Netanyahu isn't really enjoying his position at the moment, and more people inside of Israel are warning now from a civil war. Primarily, the previous Israeli defense minister, Lieberman. Lieberman posted on X saying that did Netanyahu and Yariv Levin, a main ally and a main supporter of the judicial reform. Many people call him in Israel the mastermind of the judicial reform, saying that, well, are they deciding on having a civil war? In his post, he said, It is impossible to fight simultaneously against Iran, the Supreme Court, as in the Israeli Supreme Court, and the Attorney General. We must stop the wars of the Jews and focus on ending the wars on our enemies. Something he missed is the fact that Netanyahu is the biggest killer of Jews nowadays, sending many people as cannon fodder to die for his personal ambitions and killing the Israeli prisoners of war inside of Gaza. He continued the promotion of the evasion law alongside the attempt to take over the Supreme Court and the oust of the Advocate General is pushing Israeli society to the brink of collapse and unprecedented internal conflict. The kidnapped are still in Hamas captivity. War is raging in Syria, in Judea and Samaria. Abbas's rule is on the verge of collapse. The Iranians continue to enrich uranium, and yet this government chooses to ignite a civil war. Netanyahu is sacrificing the country to preserve his coalition. We must stop the madness. And that's not the first time, of course, that people are talking about civil war. Many people in Israel were talking about, well, the end of Israel, the end of Zionism, reaching oblivion if they continue down this path. And even before that, during the days of the judicial reform, well, people were warning from a civil war. Benny Gantz, who is another previous defense minister, warned previously from a civil war back in 2023. It will lead to a civil war when it comes to the judicial reform. Urges masses take the streets, and they took the streets in record numbers. And now again, the momentum is getting its pace back up, with more criticism coming, especially from the Israeli families of the prisoners of war held in Gaza, because Netanyahu is not providing any solutions. Now, what people need to understand here is the following. For the past 14 months, Israel has been failing miserably. 14 months of genocide. Israel did not release its prisoners of war, but killed many of them instead. Millions of Israelis left the country. Their army is exhausted, demoralized, and failing. They failed to achieve any of their objectives in Gaza and in Lebanon. And now in Lebanon, we even have a ceasefire, de facto admitting that there still is a Lebanese resistance on the northern border capable of hurting Israel badly. 25% of reservists refuse to serve in the Israeli army, and there's no one to take their place. As a matter of fact, the Orthodox allies of Netanyahu in the government are raising the bar, and they're threatening now. We have more threats coming from Derai, who is the leader of Shas, pushing for a ceasefire agreement now. Some people are criticizing him in the right, but Netanyahu cannot afford having more pressure from the Orthodox after he is receiving pressure from the religious Zionists inside of Israel. The economy in Israel is disastrous after the blockade by Ansarullah in Yemen. The world's largest credit agencies lowered their grades in a very, very serious way, just one level above investment worthy. So in fact, really, Israel is no longer investment worthy. Boycott campaigns are choking the country. Countries are cutting ties with them. Now Israel is unilaterally taking away its embassy from Ireland because of their hostility to the Genostate. Its residents are questioned everywhere they go. East, West, they are asked, are you a participant of genocide? Did you commit war crimes? The inner society is split. The military is split, and the political level is split as well. They're frowned upon and viewed as a pariah state globally, with genocide cases against them and ICC arrest warrants against their prime minister. And mostly, their big lie about being the safe haven for Jewish people was totally exposed, and no one believes that anymore. Now they're trying to have certain actions to raise their the morale of their defeated nations with limited invasions in Syria, with assassinations against the Lebanese resistance, the assassinations against the Palestinian resistance, to create the illusion that Israel is something that is solid and that is here to stay, which is completely contrary to reality. Israel is at the weakest point it has ever been in and is living in constant paranoia, and nothing that Benjamin Netanyahu does or that Israel does will do anything to change that. They're worried still about Gaza. They are accepting the fact that they will have to live with both the Palestinian and the Lebanese resistance in the north and the south. They're worried about the events around them. The recent changes in Syria are making them even more paranoid, to a level where they're meeting with their Jordanian friends. So we had a report in the Times of Israel saying Israelis and Jordanians set to meet secretly amid worries over rebel surge in Syria. And the talk is, well, some of them might have links to Jordan. Iran is still smuggling weapons from Jordan to the West Bank, and the biggest aim of anyone who does not like Israel would be Jordan. Why? Because Jordan has the biggest borders and longest borders with Israel. More and more talks are coming from Israel about the Jordanian threat, the fact that we have a very long border with them, and that border is compromised. Now the Palestinian Authority is trying to show that they are a very, very good servants by having these attacks on the Palestinian resistance inside of the West Bank. However, they're facing internal problems. Many people are in the Palestinian armed forces in the West Bank are refusing to serve. They're refusing to participate in the campaign of Jenin because they're talking about their brothers and sisters, and they're avoiding the side that is actually killing them every single day, expanding and stealing their territories, to a level where the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, he said that I warn anyone who refuses to participate in the campaign of the West Bank, I will fire them. I will sack them. Now, another thing the Palestinian Authority is trying to do here is show legitimacy when it comes to Israel and when it comes to international players. Why? Because, well, so far they've been criticized. You're not doing anything against the attacks of the innocent Israelis in the West Bank and inside of Israeli territories. And also, if we're talking about a day when the war ends inside of Gaza and we reach a ceasefire, and you're looking for some sort of participation, well, you're going to have to show us how you would deal with anyone who dares to lift a finger on Israel. Israel's trying to send a message to everyone in the region that it doesn't work to lift a finger against us, because you will be constantly fought against, and we will commit a genocide against you and brutalize you and destroy you. However, even that isn't effective. Anyone resisting Israel is still continuing. The intimidation factor doesn't exist. And despite the fact that Israel is trying to create the illusions of it having the upper hand and being superior in the region, it fails, and it will continue to fail miserably.